So this is the fifth time we have this event, and 5 years back it was a real adventure. How this should be organized and run, and we started to plan it. Was it 7 years back? Yeah, 11. Yeah. So it's a long journey to create something like this, and what I will try to do here is to try to give you some ideas why do we have a challenge lab, and what was the idea with the challenge lab, and what do we think, why do we think that this kind of activity is really important, and why is the skills and abilities that the students have gained during the lab of value as we see it. So I will use about 15 minutes to do that. And I myself is a professor here at Chalmers, and at that time, when we started Challenge Lab, I was the vice president of Chalmers. So that was one reason why we were able to do that, because it's not easy to change the structure at the university. Anyone who has been working at the university will understand what I'm saying. But it goes all the way to United Nations, actually. It is about sustainable future, how on earth can we live together on this planet. That is the main topic. And of course it's a huge one. And it is formalized in this Agenda 2030, which was launched and agreed upon. Hey, seats in the middle there if you can find. There's a camera in the middle, so
yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was launched in September 2015, and it was a great number of head of governments meeting in New York. Never before had so many people on that level met on this globe, actually. And they agreed on this Agenda 2030 with the 17 sustainable development goals. And they felt an urgency in this. They felt that now we are really the last generation that really can turn this around. And it is a lot of different aspects that are urgent in this climate, but it's also poverty, it's also about migration, it's about so many aspects. And how to deal with that. And the momentum in the process was quite great, because one thing was that it was lifted up from the environmental ministry to the prime minister level. Another was that the process invited not only the politicians but also business and academy and NGOs. It was a huge process behind this. So you really get the feeling when you're there that it is serious and it is for real. And the interesting thing is that on this international level, you really feel the urgency. You really feel that this is for real. But then often it is some kind of vacuum on the national level, because they are not connected to the international level really, and they are maybe can you guide people in, so maybe you can move one make room. So there are some over there. You really feel that it is of great importance on international level, but on the national level, the national level is a little bit distance from the international level, but it's also distance from the reality. The silo structure is greatest. You can feel it on the national level, on the departments, on the ministries, and agencies. But on the local level, you are in the problem. You feel the problem in a transport system. You can not only think about the transport system as something that deals with transportation. It's also about social aspects, it's about climate. Everything is there. and you have to deal with it. But on the national level, you can look at the transport system as something that is only about security or emissions. So that is something that they often talk about, that international goals are important, but you have to work locally with. And this lab is about working locally. And working locally means often that you have to work together, because no one alone can solve the problem. No scientist can do it, no business can do it alone, or not. A municipality cannot do it alone. But all of them are important for develop the new transport systems that do not emit the carbon dioxide, for example, and create less noise, and are better when it comes to social aspects. Everyone are important to deal with that. And how can you then work with that in a way that those different actors are willing to work together and willing to deal with really complex issues that are uncertain, that are new, that are not maybe not fit in their business model. Maybe they cannot see that they can earn money on it directly. How can they be willing to test and work with that anyway? Probably that will be important. And the region that are best in doing that will be best off if they succeed. And that means that you need probably a different logic when you're working, because the old logic, the thing that you already do in every organization, you're used to, we know where to go. Then we can call it a charter trip. We have to, that is important that we continue to do that. But we also need to do some expedition, some adventure into the future, into the unknown. And that is a different logic. Because in the charter trip, you optimize, refine, and improve what you have. But in the adventure, you're experimenting, you're testing. And here, current structure, routines, budget frames provide you support for what you're doing. But in the adventure, they can hinder. That is a hinder for you to test it better. And here it's about goals, targets, steering, controlling, measuring, following up. You think you can control and plan the future. And here it's more about guiding principle, creating trust. So people feel autonomy, flexibility. It's about creating space for new initiative. It's about reflection and learning, and not least from mistakes. Dare to make mistakes together. In order to do that, you need trust in the system. And that is another logic that is. And the organization is often in center here, and the leadership is often about decision making. But here it's more about putting the question in the center. How can we transform, for example, the healthcare system in a way and formulate language? And which actors are that then important to bring into that discussion? And then it's about co-creating together. And the leadership is more about facilitation than decision making in this logic. And here it's about problem solving and solution implementation. We are wired to solve problems and implement solutions. And here we try to stay in the question and create a desirable future, something new. But that is another logic. Here is about getting rid of something that you don't want. Here is about to creating something that you really want. So I don't say this that because that this is better than that, but I say it because I think this will be necessary if we want to challenge what we do already. If we want to turn into something sustainability, we also need this logic beside this. So we need to have this, but we have to create space for this. And the lab is very much learning leadership around this. And the students from the Challenge Lab are one of the most skilled in this country to do this now. They don't understand that yet, but they will when they come out and meet other people. And it's about learning between those. So here is about creating a room for letting the result from this influence what the charter trip, correct the course. And here is about to really connect to that, because it's very funny to be here. And often this kind of space means that you meet in a room and have post-it notes and you have really fun, and it means nothing because you are not connected to this. So the thing is to connect it and how to do that. And you will see a lot of examples, 3 examples today. In the Agenda 2030, you can find 3 keywords. Transformation that I think is really important. Transformation, that is not enough just to adjust the current transport system. You have to see that something old has to go away and something new has to be created. It is transformation of system. That is something new. That is something different than adjusting. It's about integration into respect. One is about perspectives. You cannot work with the transport system at first, just look at carbon dioxide emission, and then 10 years later think about social aspects. You have to have that on board from the beginning. Otherwise, we'll end up with a transport system maybe only making really rich people able to drive in very fancy electric cars in the city, if you have not thought about it in the beginning. And universality. That means the solution has to be possible everywhere. It's one group. And in the Agenda 2030 text, it is written, leaving no one behind. And that is very much about universality. And in the lab, we are working with 3 kinds of leadership, you can say. One is a leadership for humanity, how to understand sustainability, what that really means. Another is how can we create a space for co-creation, working together, leadership leading together with others. How can we do that? How can we run a good dialogue? How can we get information? How can we create trust? How can we work together with others and work with their strength? And leading yourself. What are your values? What is driving you? And what are my strengths? And how can I react to them? So we are trying to work with those 3 levels of leadership. And they relate then to the keywords also. And transformation, I said, is about replacing something old with a new. And often what's hindering is not only the technology. It's not just to develop an electric car and it will transform the system. There is a resistance in many different aspects. For example, knowledge. If you're a really skilled diesel engineer at Volvo, maybe you don't really applaud that your department for development will be replaced with the department for development of electric cars. Of course, there is a resistance in infrastructure, market, laws and policies, and cultural norms. And to understand what can maybe be a hindrance and what can drive the change. So old system can be replaced with new system. And how can we understand sustainable development, the sustainable future, as some kind of lighthouse guiding this transition? And the method we have been working with at Chalmers Lab is backcasting. That means you start in the future. You don't start with solving the problem. You start with really understanding the question. What is important and what is needed? And you do that in all different dimensions of sustainability. And then you start to understand what is the future looking. What do we have today? And what is this distance between what we have and where we want to be? And that gap is the driver for innovation. In that gap, we try to identify leverage points. which can bridge the gap, where a little force can have a big impact. And the interesting thing here is that the students do that themselves. We just facilitate and provide. The students identify their own leverage points, identify their own question, and that is unique. And we spend a lot of time doing that. And a lot of the result from the student from Challenge Lab is in identifying leverage points in the communication with stakeholders. So the result you will see presented as a result from master thesis is only one part of the result. A lot of the result is in the dialogue with the stakeholders, creating the trust in society. And when identifying the leverage point in the different dimension here, we try to identify strategies to make them be realized. And when it comes to integration, it is about creating trust. Because if you have trust in the system, we also dare to make mistakes together, and we want to collaborate. And trust is built on trying to understand each other and spend time in listening, trying to observe what others are doing. That doesn't mean that you need to agree with others, but you need to try to understand their perspective and respect their perspective, because then you have a foundation for collaboration and creativity. What we often see in society is that we do not spend time enough to really try to understand others' perspective. That means there will be misunderstanding and lack of trust. And if there is a lack of trust, it will be a separation. And if there is a separation, there will be the same thing will be done in different places. It will be a redundancy in the system. And if that happens, there will be increased cost, decreased resources in internal competition. If you feel internal competition, you also feel fear. And fear separates even more. And that can happen within an organization or between organizations. So one very important role for the student is actually to create trust between stakeholders, to make this positive loop spin instead of this. And we have activity in the region trying to make academy and business and public sector to meet. And we have identified, and we saw results from yesterday, stakeholder telling that the Challenge Lab students have been essential for bringing academy, society, and industry together around a leverage point, a question that is important. And they have created a new kind of meeting that can be very important for the future. Challenge Lab can also be important for a university, connecting research in innovation education. So that is an idea. And we really think that students have a unique role to play, because almost everyone else in society has something written on the forehead. For me, it's Chalmers. And it works very well when I work with industry and when I work with the public sector. But when I try to convince Gothenburg University about something, they say, oh, he's from Chalmers, so he has a vested interest in this. So even for me as a researcher, I have something on my forehead. And so it is for almost everyone. But for a student, it is no threat, and people open up and share information. And we have seen that happen so many times. So students have a very important role. They get access to information. And they create trust. So what we are doing, we have a course first preparing for this lab called Leadership for Sustainable Transition. And during the spring, we have this lab for master theses. We are also doing research, and we have trying to create a challenge lab in South Africa and Germany, because they want us to do that, and that is very interesting because they're also in the same time zone as we are, so we can connect later maybe. And we also develop a Space for Change Institute trying to maybe creating a platform for students from the Challenge Lab to do their first consultant work to different organizations, because people do not really know what they are missing until they have met it. So you have to label it and convince people that this is important. And this is coming more and more. And we are planning to invite students from a couple of universities to make it even broader next year. And we are also assisting other universities to create the labs. And we are also willing to share information and also collaborate and discuss. So just contact Andreas or me. And this is our motto. Think big, start small, act now. Do a lot of mistakes fast so you can learn fast.